Jujutsu Kaisen is, at its core, a story defined by the tragedy of what-ifs. We spend hours debating the pivot points of the narrative because Gege Akutami's world is one where the smallest choice can lead to the total collapse of society. We ask ourselves, what if Junpei Yoshino had lived to join Jujutsu High? What if Satoru Gojo had been just a second faster and to dodge the ceiling of the prison realm? Or if Toji Fushiguro had finished Gojo instantly during their first encounter? These questions haunt the fandom because the margins for victory are razor thin. Every time a hero hesitates, a city falls. Every time a villain survives, 100 more people die. But the most significant what-if of the entire Culling game arc doesn't involve the protagonist Yuji Itadori, nor does it involve the prodigy Megumi Fushiguro. It revolves around the woman who essentially set the stage for the modern era of sorcery, the special grade nomad, the rebel of the jujutsu world, Yuki Tsukumo. To understand why her absence in the Culling game was such a disaster, you have to understand who Yuki is. She isn't like the other sorcerers. While Gojo was busy being the strongest and Geto was spiraling into madness, Yuki was traveling the world, seeking a way to eradicate cursed energy entirely. She didn't want to just kill spirits. She wanted to change the fundamental nature of humanity. She was a woman of why and how, not just punch and kick. She was also a former Star Religious Vessel candidate who refused her destiny, essentially telling the higher-ups and Master Tengen himself to find another way. She is the ultimate icon of agency and free will in a series often defined by cruel fate. In the original timeline, Yuki makes a tactical decision that many fans, and perhaps even the characters themselves, view as her fatal error. She agrees to stay behind with Choso to act as a final line of defense for Tengen. On paper, the logic was sound. You have two of the most capable combatants in existence guarding the literal heart of Japan. It felt like the safe play. It felt like the responsible play. But in the world of Jujutsu, playing it safe is often a death sentence. By keeping Yuki at the Star Tomb, the hero's most unpredictable and powerful wild card was effectively removed from the board. This was exactly what Kenjaku wanted. He didn't just want Tengen, he wanted the students isolated. He wanted the heavy hitters spread thin. By staying behind, Yuki allowed the Culling game to function exactly as Kenjaku intended, as a meat grinder. She watched from the sidelines while Yuta fought for his life in Sendai, while Yuji broke mentally in Tokyo, and while Maki became a demon in the Zenin estate. But today, we are rewriting that history. We aren't changing the power system, and we aren't giving the heroes a magic win button. We are changing one single dialogue exchange in that cold underground tomb. In this reality, Master Tengen looks at the situation with the cold, immortal logic of a being who has seen civilizations rise and fall. Instead of asking for a bodyguard, Tengen realizes that the Culling game is a ritual that requires momentum. If the heroes play defense, they have already lost. In this timeline, Tengen looks at Yuki and Choso and says, "Do not wait for the end to come to you. Go out and shatter the game before Kenjaku can finish his preparations." Tengen realizes that hiding is no longer an option. The Star Tomb is not a fortress, it is a cage. Instead of a defensive play that waits for the enemy to arrive, the heroes decide to cut the head off the snake. Imagine the shift in energy. Yuki Tsukumo doesn't take off her jacket to settle in for a long wait. She puts her helmet on. She kicks her motorcycle into gear. She doesn't just represent power, she represents a shift in the narrative's gravity. When a special grade enters the Culling game with the intent to hunt, the rules don't just bend, they break. We're about to explore the butterfly effect of a world where the Queen of Mass decides to go on the offensive. This isn't just about winning fights, it's about a special grade sorcerer rewriting the win conditions of Kenjaku's masterpiece. From the blood-soaked streets of the Sendai colony to the psychological battle for Yuji Itadori's soul, everything is about to change. This is the Queen of Mass. What if Yuki Tsukumo entered the Culling game? To understand why Yuki Tsukumo entering the Culling game changes everything, we first have to talk about the sheer mechanical absurdity of her power. In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, special grade isn't just a title for a strong sorcerer, it is a category error. It is a designation reserved for individuals who represent a systemic threat to an entire nation. While grade 1 sorcerers are the peak of attainable jujutsu, special grades are anomalies that break the rules of reality. And even among that elite group, Yuki is a standout because her technique, Star Rage, or Bamba Ye, deals with the most fundamental law of the physical world, mass. The core of Yuki's technique allows her to imbue herself and her Shikigami Garuda with imaginary mass. Now, let's pause and look at the physics here, because this is where the video essay deep dive really begins. In basic Newtonian physics, force equals mass times acceleration, F equals ma. In a standard jujutsu fight, most sorcerers increase their force by focusing on the A, the acceleration. They use cursed energy reinforcement to move faster, to snap their punches harder, or to increase their output, which is like the pressure behind a fire hose. But Yuki ignores the output race entirely. She focuses on the M by adding imaginary mass to her fists, her legs, or Garuda. She is essentially turning her body into a celestial object. We aren't just talking about a heavy punch. We are talking about a punch that carries the weight of a skyscraper, or a mountain, or a continent without losing a single frame of speed. This is the cheat code aspect of Star Rage. Because the mass is imaginary, it does not affect her actual weight or density in a way that slows her down. She doesn't become a slow, lumbering giant. She remains as fast and agile as a world-class martial artist. But when her fist connects, the physics of the impact behave as if she has infinite density. Think about what that does to the meta of the Culling game. Most of the players we meet in the colonies rely on sophisticated techniques to survive. They rely on reinforcement to dampen blows. But you cannot reinforce yourself against the mass of the planet. If Yuki punches you, there is no blocking. There is only the total collapse of your physical form. This brings us to her secret weapon, Garuda. In the original series, Garuda is often underestimated, but in our what-if scenario, Garuda is the ultimate force multiplier. Because Yuki can apply Star Rage to her Shikigami, Garuda effectively becomes a second special grade level threat on the battlefield. It can be used as a whip, a projectile, or a tether. Imagine a cursed tool that can suddenly weigh 50,000 tons while it's wrapped around your neck. There is no counterplay to that. It's not just a power-up, it's a conceptual middle finger to the laws of jujutsu. We also have to compare her to the other heavy hitters present in the colonies to see how she stacks up. Take Ryu Ishigori, for example. Ryu has the highest cursed energy output in history. His Granite Blast is a beam of pure destruction, but energy output is still energy. It follows the laws of friction and dispersal. Yuki's mass is a concept. When her fist, which possesses imaginary infinite mass, meets a beam of energy, the energy doesn't push her back. It shatters. She doesn't have to dodge Ryu's ultimate attack. She can literally walk through it because the concept of her mass is more real than the energy he's firing. This is why Kenjaku was so careful to keep her out of the game. Most sorcerers are specialists. They have a trick. Uro bends space. Kurorushi controls insects. Druv creates territories. But Yuki is a generalist of destruction. Her technique is so simple and so overwhelming that it bypasses the need for complex strategy. She is the natural hard counter to almost every player in the Culling game. She is a walking extinction event, and as she crosses the barrier into the Sendai colony, the deadlock between the four great players isn't just going to be broken, it's going to be pulverized. To understand the impact of Yuki's arrival in Sendai, we have to look at the state of the colony when she enters. In the original timeline, Sendai was a nightmare of tactical stagnation. You had a four-way deadlock between the highest level players: Ryu Ishigori, the man with the cannon blast output, Takako Uro, the sky manipulator from the Heian era, Druv Lakdawala, the ancient conqueror, and Kurorushi, the literal embodiment of a cockroach infestation. When Yuta Okotsu arrived, he had to play a delicate game of resource management. He was forced to reveal his trump cards one by one, exhausting his cursed energy and pushing his reverse cursed energy to the limit just to survive the sheer volume of attacks. It was a beautiful, desperate struggle, but in our new timeline, that struggle never happens. Because while Yuta is a surgeon, Yuki Tsukumo is a demolition crew. Picture the scene. Yuta is surrounded, Kurorushi's swarm is blotting out the sun, and the air is thick with the smell of decay. Suddenly, the barrier of the Sendai colony doesn't just ripple, it shatters. Yuki Tsukumo doesn't sneak past the veil, she punches through it. She arrives on her signature motorcycle, flying through the air like a comet, with Garuda trailing behind her like a golden ribbon of death. Her first target is Kururushi. In the original story, this curse was a persistent threat that required Yuta to use positive energy from his mouth to neutralize it. A risky, disgusting move. In this timeline, Yuki doesn't even get off her bike. She simply imbues Garuda with the mass of a tectonic plate and hurls it into the center of the swarm. There is no fight. There is only a localized earthquake. The sheer pressure of the imaginary mass flattens every insect and crushes Kururushi into a pulp before it can even register an enemy is present. The swarm is gone in seconds. This is the moment the deadlock truly dies. Yuki skids to a halt next to a stunned Yuta Okatsu, and this is where we see the special grade dynamic shift the mood of the entire arc. In the original series, Yuta is always the one carrying the burden. He's the protector, the one who has to stay calm. But here, Yuki looks at him, this exhausted teenager covered in cockroach blood, and she gives him that confident, cocky grin. "You look tired, Okatsu-kun," she says. "Why don't you take a breather? I'll handle the heavy hitter." What follows is a 5-minute masterclass in combat efficiency. Ryu Ishigori, seeing a new challenger, does exactly what you'd expect. He fires a maximum output granite blast. This is a beam of energy that leveled city blocks. In the original timeline, Yuta had to deflect this with his bare hands, suffering massive damage, but Yuki doesn't deflect. She walks toward it. As the beam connects, Yuki activates Star Rage. Because her mass is imaginary, it doesn't follow the standard laws of energy transfer. The granite blast hits her like water hitting a diamond. It splashes around her, unable to move her an inch because you cannot push something that has the conceptual density of a black hole. She walks through the fire, reaches Ryu, and delivers a single focused punch. It's not a flurry of blows, it's one hit. The impact sends Ryu flying through 3 skyscrapers, ending his participation in the game instantly. Then there's Takako Uro. Her technique, sky manipulation, allows her to turn the sky into a surface, letting her thin out or warp any physical attack. She is essentially untouchable, but Yuki's power is a conceptual counter. When Uro tries to warp the space around Yuki's fist, she finds that she can't. Why? Because Yuki's imaginary mass is so great that it exerts a gravitational pull on the technique itself. You can't warp the sky when the thing hitting you has more presence than the sky itself. By the time the dust settles, the Sendai colony, which took Yuta nearly a dozen chapters of grueling combat to clear, is resolved in less than 10 minutes of real time. But the real butterfly effect isn't just the victory, it's the state of the heroes. In the original, Yuta was drained. He was at his limit. In this timeline, Yuta is at 90% strength. He has his domain expansion ready, his reverse cursed energy is fresh, and he has 200 points in the bank because Yuki helped him secure the kills. They don't just have points, they have momentum. They immediately add the rules to allow players to transfer points and exit the game. But more importantly, Yuki and Yuta are now a united front. 2 special grades, fresh and ready, moving toward the next objective. The meat grinder of the Culling game has just been bypassed. While the Sendai colony becomes a showcase of Yuki's overwhelming physical power, the real heart of our story shifts back to Tokyo number 1. To understand why this change is so vital, we have to look at the psychological state of Yuji Itadori during the start of the Culling game. In the original timeline, Yuji was a ghost of himself. He was carrying the crushing weight of the Shibuya incident, the thousands of deaths caused by Sukuna, the loss of Nanami, and the apparent death of Nobara. He viewed himself not as a person, but as a cog in a machine of extermination. He was suicidal, reckless, and completely alone in his own head. Even with Megumi by his side, Yuji was a man waiting for an excuse to die. But in our what if, the dynamic shifts entirely because of one man, Choso. In the original story, Choso was left behind at the Star Tomb to guard Tengen. He was sidelined, forced to wait for a fight that wouldn't happen for weeks. But here, he is in the trenches with his younger brother. Choso is the emotional anchor Yuji never had. He doesn't see Yuji as a vessel or a cog. He sees him as his brother, the only family he has left. As they enter Tokyo number 1, the energy is different. Yuji isn't just surviving, he's being guided. When they eventually track down Hiromi Higuruma, the genius lawyer turned sorcerer, the encounter plays out in a way that fundamentally changes the trajectory of Yuji's soul. In the original timeline, Yuji fought Higuruma alone. He entered the deadly sentencing domain and immediately confessed to the mass murder in Shibuya, even though it was Sukuna who committed the crime. Yuji's guilt was so absolute that he accepted a death sentence from the judgment. He wanted to be punished. But in this timeline, Yuji isn't the only one on the stand. Choso is there. When Higuruma activates his domain expansion, it forces a trial based on the laws of the Japanese legal system. In the original, Yuji's trial was a tragedy of self-hatred, but with Choso present, we get a legal logic battle that explores the very nature of identity in the jujutsu world. Imagine Choso, a being who has lived for 150 years as a cursed object, standing up as a witness for Yuji. Choso knows better than anyone what it's like to be a tool used by others. He has spent his entire existence being manipulated by kenjaku. When Judgment levels the charges of the Shibuya massacre against Yuji, it's Choso who speaks up. He argues that under the law of jujutsu, a vessel and the cursed spirit within it are separate legal entities. He brings up the precedent of the death painting wombs. He argues that Yuji Itadori did not commit these crimes. He was a victim of a hijacking by an ancient sorcerer. This forces Higuruma, a man who became a sorcerer because he was obsessed with the inherent flaws of the justice system, to stop and think. Higuruma isn't a villain, he's a man looking for truth. In the original, he was moved by Yuji's honesty, but in this timeline, he is moved by Choso's devotion. He sees a brother willing to risk his life to prove the innocence of a boy who has lost everything. The trial section of this video is where we dive deep into the philosophy of guilt. Because Choso is there to provide context and support, Yuji doesn't break. He doesn't accept the guilty verdict in his heart. Instead of the confession that nearly got him killed, we see a legal debate that ends with Haguruma realizing the truth. Sukuna is the criminal, and Yuji is the prison. The result? Higuruma doesn't just give up his points. He becomes a devoted ally immediately. He sees in Yuji and Choso a glimmer of the true justice he had been searching for. By the 24-minute mark of our story, the heroes in Tokyo have won a psychological victory that is just as important as Yuki's physical victory in Sendai. Yuji's mental state is at an all-time high. He isn't a cog anymore. He's a brother. He's a warrior who believes he deserves to live. And more importantly, the heroes now have a genius lawyer on their side who understands the rules of the Culling game better than anyone else. They have Yuji, Choso, Higuruma, Megumi, and eventually Hikari, all working as a cohesive unit. The stage is set. The heroes are no longer scattered, they are no longer broken, they are a united front moving toward the endgame with a clarity they never had in the original timeline. And it's all because Yuki Tsukumo decided to take the offensive, allowing the Brotherhood of Tokyo to flourish. Now we reach the climax. Every thread we've pulled in this alternate timeline, Yuki's dominance in Sendai, Yuji's mental fortification in Tokyo, and the survival of the core cast converges at a single terrifying point, the moment Sukuna decides to move. In the original timeline, Sukuna's in-chain binding vow was a masterpiece of timing. He waited until the heroes were scattered, exhausted, and emotionally compromised. He took over Yuji's body, ripped off a finger, and force-fed it to Megumi Fushiguro, effectively hijacking the Ten Shadows technique and leaving the protagonist group in absolute shambles. This was the endgame moment where Kenjaku's plan seemed inevitable. But in our timeline, we have a variable that Kenjaku didn't account for: Yuki Tsukumo's lifelong obsession with the soul. Yuki wasn't just a fighter, she was a researcher. She wrote the literal book on soul research, the same notes that in the original series gave the heroes a fighting chance against Sukuna much later on. But here she is alive, active, and present. She knows the outline of the soul. She understands that a vessel isn't just a container, it's a living cage. When the moment of end chain arrives, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Because the heroes are united, they aren't miles apart, they are together. Yuta, Yuki, Choso, and Yuji are regrouping. When Sukuna emerges from Yuji's mouth, the air doesn't just turn cold, it turns heavy. But unlike the original timeline where the characters were paralyzed by shock, Yuki Tsukumo is prepared for the metaphysical shift. The moment Sukuna attempts to force the finger onto Megumi, Yuki doesn't try to out-muscle the King of Curses. She knows that against Sukuna, pure speed isn't enough. Instead, she uses her understanding of the soul as a weapon. She applies her imaginary mass not to her fists, but to the conceptual space between the souls of the vessel and the curse. Imagine the visual. As Sukuna lunges for Megumi, Yuki activates Star Rage at a level of precision we've never seen. She pins Megumi's soul into place with the weight of her technique, making it nearly impossible for Sukuna to merge his essence with Megumi's body. It's a battle of spiritual gravity. This delay, this mere 5 seconds of resistance, changes everything. In the original, Sukuna had all the time in the world. Here he is surrounded by the most dangerous collection of sorcerers in history. Suddenly it isn't a 1 versus 1, it is a 5 versus 1. You have Yuta Okotsu, fresh and full of cursed energy, manifesting Rika. You have Choso, fueled by the desire to protect his brother, flooding the area with piercing blood. You have Hikari, fresh off a jackpot, and Yuji, who is no longer fighting his own mind. And at the center of it all, you have the Queen of Mass, Yuki Tsukumo, acting as the general of the battlefield. Kenjaku's entire plan for the Culling game relied on chaos. It relied on the butterfly effect of tragedy. But with Yuki as the anchor, the heroes have established order. In this final confrontation, Sukuna is forced into a corner before he can even complete the possession of Megumi. The battle that follows would be the most high-octane sequence in the series. We're talking about a coordinated assault where Star Rage punches meet granite blasts and black flashes. Because the heroes are fresh, they don't give Sukuna the room to breathe. The Culling game doesn't end with Sukuna's triumphant revival and the death of the cast. It ends with his containment. By the time the dust settles, the world is different. The merger with Tengen is halted because Kenjaku has lost his window of opportunity. The higher-ups are powerless because the special grades are united against them. Yuki Tsukumo was a character defined by what she could have been. She was a woman who saw the flaws in the world and died trying to fix them in a basement. But by putting her on the front lines, we see the true potential of a special grade. She wasn't just a fighter, she was the missing piece of the puzzle. She was the only person with the power, the knowledge, and the rebellious spirit to tell fate no. In this world, the Culling game isn't a tragedy, it's a revolution. What do you think? If Yuki had ignored her orders and entered the game, would Sukuna even have stood a chance? Or was his victory always a matter of destiny, regardless of who was on the field? Let me know your theories in the comments below.